The story begins with a saying that marriage was the grave of life, but for Tanaka Makoto, getting employed was the real grave. Tanaka sipped his energy drink while reading through the subjugation report, which listed 5 A-ranked monster trolls, 4 basilisks, and 3 S-ranked tyrant dragons, and they were all troublesome foes. He realized he wouldn't be catching the last train home again. As a member of the Black Dog Guild, Tanaka knew it was time to hurry to the dungeon. He couldn't even remember the last time he had been home. Exhausted, he just wanted to sleep. 10 years ago, mysterious structures called dungeons had suddenly appeared around the world, bringing with them unknown creatures. These dungeons contained weapons built with unfamiliar technology. People became explorers, delving into dungeons in search of treasure, and those who entered without protection often didn't make it back. With the emergence of dungeons, individuals with special talents awakened to powers that made them dozens of times stronger than average humans. While riding the train, Tanaka considered whether he himself had awakened to such power. Although he hadn't imagined monsters like these existed. 2 people behind him were chatting about wanting to dive into a dungeon, but admitted they weren't among the awakened. Tanaka overheard them talking about a popular dungeon exploration stream on a site called DTube. He knew that being a streamer was the current trend, but he had never tried it, having devoted his life entirely to work. He wondered how much streamers earned and realized, with a sigh, that he was getting old as such thoughts crossed his mind. Soon, he exited the train. He arrived at the Shibuya Underground Dungeon, where the receptionist confirmed his registration. As he moved forward, he realized it was finally time to enter Onigaiwa, the Shibuya Underground Dungeon. Suddenly, he remembered something and quickly pulled a small drone out of his jacket. It was an auto-filming device that sent footage to the company and could stream depending on the settings. Tanaka only used it to report his quotas. He turned on his phone and accessed the company's streaming server, but then he slipped and smashed his face on the stairs. The nearby guard asked if he was all right. Tanaka straightened up and assured him he was fine, just a little dip. The guard looked at him and thought he resembled a walking corpse. While climbing the stairs to the dungeon, Tanaka remembered he had only taken a 2-hour nap and hadn't been home in 2 weeks. He couldn't even recall the last time he had slept properly. He questioned what he was doing with his life. His company worked as a government subcontractor, which sounded respectable, but in truth, they were forced to take on the jobs even the government didn't want. The workload was always heavy, and Tanaka felt that if things continued this way, he might die from overwork. But he was too busy to even think about quitting. Finally, he reached the dungeon entrance and muttered that he was diving into the dungeon once again with a dead expression. He tried to adjust the drone settings on his phone, but due to his blurry vision, he accidentally selected live streaming on the official Black Dog channel. He noted that he was diving into one of Tokyo's largest dungeons, the Shibuya Underground Dungeon, and this was where he would be working today. He tightened his tie and resolved to begin. Unbeknownst to him, this day would change his life completely. As the stream started, viewers began commenting, questioning the purpose of the broadcast and pointing out that Tanaka had chosen the wrong settings. Some called it a suicide stream, and initially only 3 people were watching. Soon more joined, recognizing the official Black Dog channel and mentioning the daily quota listed in the stream's description. Meanwhile, Tanaka was rushing through the dusty dungeon, too busy to care. The dungeon had 4 layers: upper, middle, lower, and lowest, and he was heading directly to the deepest one. Standing at the edge of a cliff, he remarked that normally one would descend layer by layer, but he didn't have that luxury, so he jumped straight down. Feeling the weight of his exhaustion, he thought about how nice it would be to just go home, sleep, and eat something warm. He noticed the drone still recording, but shrugged it off, thinking the company president wouldn't bother watching. He grumbled that he wasn't paid enough, yet he was expected to do such dangerous work. Tired beyond belief, he murmured that he'd be lucky to get even 2 hours of sleep that day. The viewers began commenting about the mistreatment of explorers by the Black Dog Company, expressing sympathy for Tanaka. Some noted that the number of viewers had risen to 20 and predicted it would soon reach 10,000. Meanwhile, Tanaka's phone kept ringing with notifications. He glanced at the caller ID but couldn't tell who was calling, since his phone only contained company contacts and a few old friends. He wasn't active on social media, so he figured the calls weren't from there. Assuming they were just work-related, he chose to ignore them, knowing he'd likely be scolded again at work tomorrow. Resigned, he pressed on. Tanaka muttered that his destination was the lowest level of the Shibuya underground dungeon, and at its center was a well. He decided to jump straight down to reach the bottom in one go. He knew it was dangerous, but if it weren't for the absurd quota he had to meet, he wouldn't have to do something so reckless. As he leapt, his phone buzzed again with more notifications. He dismissed them, assuming none were important. The drone still hovered nearby, faithfully filming him. Though he was still uncomfortable being recorded, he accepted it as company protocol. The footage was meant for internal reports, but he imagined how embarrassing it would be if it were ever actually streamed. He thought streamers were amazing and wondered if he would get comments if he ever tried it himself. The chat exploded with reactions to his free fall through the dungeon. Tanaka looked down, bracing for the landing. A monster was already waiting for him before he hit the ground. The viewers were stunned to see it, some commenting that it had been a while since the last death caught live on stream. Tanaka identified the creature as a red wyvern, a low-level monster that likely mistook him for prey. As it lunged toward him, he swiftly reached for his sword and, in one fluid motion, slashed it cleanly. The wyvern was sliced into two before he landed in the well. It wasn't a graceful landing and more of a crash, but the monster's two halves hit the ground behind him. The viewers were astonished. They couldn't understand how the monster had been split in two when it seemed like Tanaka hadn't even drawn his sword. They questioned whether such a feat was even humanly possible. Meanwhile, the viewership of the stream surged past 50 million, spreading like wildfire across social media. Tanaka groaned, commenting on how noisy his phone had become, unable to fathom how many times people had tried calling him. He slid his sword back into his belt, only to hear a sound up ahead. As he looked forward, he saw an entire army of monsters standing before him. A tired but resolute expression crossed his face as he remarked that things were finally starting to get interesting. Takada was currently in the lowest level of the Shibuya underground dungeon, a perilous area overrun by powerful monsters. Trolls, basilisks, and death knights roamed the depths, each one a formidable threat. Among them was a tyrant dragon, so tough that Takada didn't want to fight it, but he had no choice since it was part of his quota. He drew his sword and muttered that it was time to get to work. All the monsters stood before him, ready to strike. The trolls, with their muscular bodies and terrifying faces, had given him a hard time the first time he encountered them. As they charged forward, Takada swiftly outmaneuvered them. Though trolls were highly durable, decapitating them rendered them motionless, and they possessed no special abilities. In fact, they were among the weaker monsters that appeared this deep in the dungeon. Takada sliced through the necks of every troll that attacked him in one smooth motion. Viewers watching the stream began commenting again, claiming there was no way he could do that and insisting the footage was edited. Some said that trolls were troublesome monsters and doubted anyone could defeat them alone. Takada grew irritated as his phone rang incessantly. He grumbled that people were really pestering him today, despite him repeatedly saying he was at work. The next monster to face him was a basilisk. Viewers noted they had never seen one before, and there were very few videos of it alive. One viewer remarked that the basilisk could spew petrifying breath, and anyone who failed to dodge it would die instantly. Another pointed out that the stream had just surpassed 5 million viewers, a milestone reached for the first time in a while. Takada knew the basilisk's breath could turn a person's body to stone, and if that happened, it was game over. He thought that if he had companions, they might be able to use an item to heal him, but as a perpetual soloist, he had none. Realizing he needed to end the battle before the creature could breathe, he rushed forward and struck. Soon, the basilisk collapsed to the ground, dead. Takada explained that the basilisk had a weak spot on its neck, and if one missed it even slightly, its petrifying breath would spread. Many people didn't know about this vulnerability. The viewers expressed surprise, wondering how many basilisks he had fought to discover such a detail. Even international viewers began tuning in, and it was no surprise that the stream now had over 10 million watchers. Takada's phone rang again, further irritating him. He noted that it was more persistent than usual, vibrating constantly even during fights. He figured that if he answered, he would only receive insults, so he chose to ignore it. He was lost in thought when he suddenly realized that a proud A-ranked tyrant dragon was standing before him. It was a fearsome enemy, dozens of times tougher and more powerful than a troll. With the ability to breathe superheated air capable of melting even iron, it posed a serious threat. The viewers began commenting in panic, saying the dragon was far too big and that Takata was going to die. Some declared it a death notice and urged him to run. One viewer noted that the stream had surpassed 50 million viewers. The dragon and Takata faced each other, both prepared to strike. Takata knew that the breath of an A-ranked tyrant dragon had immense firepower, and if he were hit, he'd be reduced to ashes without even a trace of charcoal left behind. Determined to avoid that fate, he drew his sword and charged forward. Viewers flooded the chat with warnings, calling him a dead man and reminding him that he was up against a tyrant dragon. The battle lasted only a few seconds before Takata withdrew his sword, having already split the dragon cleanly in two. The viewers were stunned, unable to believe that he had defeated such a powerful creature in a single strike. Some questioned if swords now produced shockwaves, while others jokingly called him a corporate slave sword master and remarked that corporate warriors were insanely strong. Takata turned around and glanced lazily at the remaining monsters. The tyrant dragon had been their boss, and with it defeated, the rest had lost the will to fight. Even if he defeated them, the materials would go to the company anyway, and since he had already fulfilled his quota, there was no reason to continue. He told them to go and leave, and the remaining monsters fled in a panic. Takata realized he had finished earlier than expected and needed to collect the materials required for his quota and head home. Though reluctant, he decided to check his phone. To his shock, his lock screen was flooded with thousands of notifications. He had expected calls, but not this level of chaos. As he opened his phone, he was confused to find an overwhelming number of DTube notifications and thousands of comments on his videos. He couldn't understand what was going on. He was sure he had set the stream settings to company only, but he quickly realized he had accidentally made it public. Everything he had done had been broadcast nationwide. He knew his stream wasn't supposed to have that much reach, and it was certainly not hundreds, not thousands, not even, but now it had over 100 million viewers. He was using the company's account, which had around 2,000 subscribers, so a modest view count would have been expected. But the reality was far beyond what even top streamers could achieve, since most of them never reached 1 million live viewers, let alone 100 million. He read the comments congratulating him and saw that corporate slave sword master was trending across social media. Viewers asked how he had become so strong. At this point, nothing he said could calm the situation. He decided that he would definitely write a report on everything that had happened.